even though ultimately it was like kind of long, I loved it. It's a thrilling experience. The pacing is great. There's not a single fucking moment of waste in it. There's no wasteful moments in it at all. Every single thing pretty much ties back to, like they did a really good job of, just like tying everything back, like little things that you see every now and then. That sewing sequence is actually a perfect example of this as well. My parents slept through it. I think it's like 9.5 out of 10 movie. Holy fuck, it was so goddamn good. I loved it. And yeah, it was great. Here's a real moment when the guns fell silent. The last moment. 1 minute before the hour, all guns are firing. And then at 11 a.m., November 11th, 1918. Courtesy of the Imperial War Museum, the track is not a 1918 recording, but it isn't fake either. The recording was made recently by Coda Dakota. They used painstaking process making a realistic recreation of the moment. The sounds of gunfire and shells were reconstructed using the data, so it's not real. It's not like someone was like there fucking recording it, but it's a recreation of it. I mean, shit like this happened in World War I a lot during trench warfare, which was particularly brutal. Like there's stories even out of like Gallipoli with the Anzac forces and the Turks fucking doing a ceasefire so they could play fucking soccer with one another, shit like that. You know what I mean? Christmas truce. There are a lot of things like that where that just shows like the humanity of people on both sides that are just fighting for no fucking reason whatsoever. I have not seen 1917, but I'll watch it if it's good. The Christmas truce that really happened in the trenches.
In 2016, IWM was contacted by the family of one of the soldiers shown in this photograph. We now know that this is Arno Bohm, a German soldier standing alongside British troops from the London Rifle Brigade. They're standing together in the middle of no man's land during the Christmas truce of 1914. This photograph captures a moment so unusual in the First World War that many people at the time, and to this day, believed it to be a myth. In the midst of a brutal, total war, how did this momentary peace come about? What impact did it have in the course of the First World War? And why did it never happen again?
We were in the front line. We were about 300 yards from the Germans, and we had, I think, on Christmas Eve, we'd been singing carols and this, that, and the other, and the Germans had been doing the same, and we'd been shouting.
Instead of going, religion, am I right? Like the most annoying Reddit atheist that you are, recognize that, like, yes, this is a moment to showcase the humanity, okay? Like, these are human beings, bro. Holy fuck. That's the point. The point of this is that, like, they are united. They have the same interests, you know? They just want to go home. They want a fucking hot meal and a roof over their heads, you know? They want to go back to their friends and family. It's not even about Christmas. It's not about religion. It's about, it could have been anything. I mean, that's why I brought up the football example, okay? Because it's like, that's another thing, you know? These are the same class. These are just working class folk who are given a fucking rifle to either defend their homeland or because, like, they've been fucking geared into thinking that, You know, they're going to take over Paris or whatever.
To each other, sometimes rude remarks, more often just joking remarks. Eventually, a German said, "Tomorrow, you no shoot, we no shoot."
At the start of the war, many believed it would all be over by Christmas. However, by December that year, it was obvious that this was not the case, and thousands of families and soldiers were facing a Christmas of separation, grief, and hardship.
So for those soldiers who were in the trenches over winter 1914, the conditions would have got gradually worse and worse. So you got a lot of rain, a lot of frost, and the general living conditions would have been terrible.
Yes, the stitching scene did sound like machine gun fire. I did notice that, yes.
But the British troops were not alone. In the trenches opposite theirs, sometimes only 30 yards away across the strip of no man's land, were German soldiers in the exact same situation.
There was lots of opportunity for each side to communicate with the other. And this was a regular thing which happened right from the start of trench warfare. But communication would often be in the form of soldiers from one side shouting.
These guys said times like that is so over. Did you hear the story of Wagner executing their own with a sledgehammer? Bro, 17 million people died in World War I. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, you think they didn't do brutal shit back then? They were using flamethrowers, dog. The fuck do you mean? War is the most unchanging thing, okay? As far as like human existence goes, us being brutal to one another is not new, and it's not old, and it's not gonna ever fucking go away. Yeah, I did see that. Like you're nuts though to think that like this was you know, these guys were using gas on one another. They were using conventional weapons that are no longer allowed. Okay. World War I is like one of the more brutal ones. What the fuck? Like they literally were like, yeah, some of that shit was so crazy we can't do that again. Okay.
Over insults to those in the other trenches. But what was interesting at Christmas is that both sides actually started to communicate in more friendly terms. It really began with the Germans singing Christmas carols and setting up Christmas trees on top of their parapets, and so they came to very much empathise with one another.
I remember very well Christmas. I remember the Christmas day when the German and the French soldiers left their trenches, went to the barbed wire between them with...
Yeah, World War I was so good, they were like, we need to have a second one, okay? We need to... They were like, World War I's so nice, we got to do it twice. Straight up. There was a fucking sequel. Spoiler alert for all of you out there who are oblivious to the history of the planet, but...
Champagne and cigarettes in their hands and... had feelings of fraternization and shouted they wanted to finish the war, and that lasted only 2 days, 1.5 really, and then strict order came that no fraternization was allowed and we had to stay back in our trenches.
The Christmas truce varied in different parts of the front line. Ceasefires were hastily arranged, sometimes to enable the collection and burial of bodies or to allow the trenches to be repaired. In other cases, the soldiers simply enjoyed fraternizing with the other side.
And we shared fags, goodies with the Germans.
That's yo, homie is so old British, bro.
And then from somewhere, somehow, this football appeared.
Was it a proper football?
It was a proper football. But we didn't form a team. It wasn't a team game in any sense of the word. You know, it was a kick-about. Everybody was having a go. It came from their side. It wasn't from our side where the ball came.
How many people were taking part, do you think?
Well, I should think there'd be at least a couple of hundred.
Did you kick the ball?
Oh, yes, I had a go at it. I was pretty good then, 19.
But while some parts of the front line were playing football and swapping stories,
I was having a
others were
fucking
confused
go,
by what
yeah.
they heard, or felt no inclination to socialise with those they had so recently been fighting.
Usually the higher-ups that were not too fond of the fraternization of the enemy, considering that, like, you need to fucking murk them with a shovel when you walk into the trenches 24 hours later, that certainly was not seen as like a positive thing. My audio is a little bit out of sync. Yes, my camera audio is a little bit out of sync. It's just shut the fuck up.
After a few
You're not brilliant for catching it.
moments, there were lighted objects raised above the German parapet. The Germans were shouting over to our trench. There's no doubt about that at all. And before we could take any action or do anything, we were ordered to open rapid fire, you see, which we did.
I'm so scared that there's going to be some fucking TOS.
Rapid fire. They simply carried on with their celebrations and were having a very fine time indeed. They certainly were not going to do it anymore. They thought that we were idiots, I suppose. We were. Well, not us, but the command, you see.
The way that trench warfare
Yeah, I know it's a cigarette, dude. What are you saying?
was organised in the First World War, each sector was very distinctive, and so you wouldn't necessarily know what was happening in the sector next door to you. And you do get stories of one area of the front where they're experiencing a truce, but then suddenly they get fired on by the troops in the next sector who don't realise what's happening.
For those soldiers not involved, the truce must have seemed unbelievable, and even more so for those back.
The French were less inclined to the British because they were on their land after all. Yeah, no, I know. They were understandably a little bit more pissed off at the Germans and basically humiliated them every step of the way, which the Germans did deserve, for the record.
Back home. For months.
Not the German people, but like Germans as a whole in that situation. Like, I mean, come on, bro, you can't do that. You can't be like, oh man, everyone else is doing imperialism out there. Maybe I should do imperialism in my backyard. I don't like that we got cut out of going into Africa in the same way that these motherfuckers did. You know, we're a bit landlocked here, so let's just make do with what we got going on.
Media and government propaganda had shaped a perception of German soldiers as bloodthirsty enemies, baby eaters, devils, ruthless killers. But news of the remarkable Christmas truce soon spread abroad. By the end of December, letters and photos arrived home, and newspapers began to publish accounts of the truce.
My father was delighted to have a letter giving such a description.
They had overseas colonies, though? Yeah, but like, brother, you're comparing it to England. What are you talking about? Like, listen, if you're Germany and you got England and you got France and you're looking at these motherfuckers and they're just caked up, okay? They're doing slave trades, okay? They got all the bountiful wealth from that. They're still fucking sucking Africa dry, okay? And then your little colonies look like shit. Like, what the fuck? I want some of that. What the hell is this?
Events, and he sent them up to the Daily Telegraph. I got into frightful rocket. That showed up that it must have been me who wrote it, and Mossy got hold of me, gave me an awful dressing down for daring to write to the press. But of course I didn't. My old man wrote to the press.
These photographs were taken on personal cameras that some soldiers had taken with them into the trenches. Photography in the trenches was discouraged for obvious reasons, but during the Christmas truce of 1914, soldiers on both sides of the trenches could not resist the opportunity to document such a unique event.
At the beginning of January 1915, the newspapers suddenly start printing these letters, and to begin with, there was a certain amount of disbelief, but then over time, suddenly photographs started to appear as well. And by that time, the evidence was clear that this did happen. It wasn't a myth. And the media at the time absolutely loved it. There were lots of discussions in the newspapers about whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. And, in a way, it's a wonderful snapshot of Christmas 1914 when attitudes were still slightly...
When we see imagery from war like this that humanizes like the American soldiers and shit, it's so disproportionate, the warfare now, because you're not like having two state actors with like, evenly matched gear, I guess, to a certain degree, that like it is almost always to just make it seem like it's like cop propaganda, you know, when the cop goes into the fucking black neighborhood and plays basketball, it's like that. This was, you know, both sides being fucking duped in one way or the other, or being sucked into a war that they did not, they would have been better off not doing. Successful attacks were measured in hundreds of yards and paid for in lives by hundreds of thousands. Pat's the glory. TOS at 1052. Thank you.
Naive, because the war had only really just begun. You find that in 1915 and onwards, the war becomes almost a much more serious endeavour.
The Christmas truce would come to be remembered as something of a blip in the regular conduct of the war. It conflicted with the patriotic aggression required by both sides. It also served to highlight the great contrast between war and religion. How can you fight a war of aggression while also celebrating Christmas, the traditional time for peace and goodwill? For those reasons, the Christmas truce was increasingly seen as unimportant and awkward to fit into the standard narrative of the First World War.
You never get anything like the Christmas truce happening again. And over time, not only is it seen as an anomaly, but almost as a myth. And it gets to the point where people are actually doubting whether it happened in the first place, which continues.
Chat's so funny. Chat's like, Chat is canceling a guy who probably got fucking domed, okay? Literally like an hour after that video was shot. Chad's literally mad about a guy, like some 17-year-old farmer who got fucking murked with a shovel to the head. Probably like immediately after that footage was done. And you're like, wow, inappropriate conduct there. Yeah, no shit, dude. 100 plus years ago.
You know, right up to this day, so there's still a lot of confusion about whether there was a football match played and things like this.
Where's the TOS?
We didn't cross to France until March of 1915. But although it would be arrogant to say that the thing didn't actually take place, I very much doubt whether anything of the nature or magnitude that has been claimed for it took place at all. Now, the purpose of that barbed wire in the trenches was to keep each side in its own place. Therefore, why would anybody try to break that? And if anybody tried, what were the NCOs doing? What were the officers doing? I think the whole thing borders on the fairy tale and may be classed with the Russians with snow on their boots and the angels of Mons.
We know by looking at German newspapers that the Christmas truce was covered there in a very similar way to how it was in Britain. In the 1920s and the 1930s, you see definite examples of how the Christmas truce changes in its depiction, because there was a much greater emphasis then on the German soldier as a hero fighting a noble war. Whereas,
imagine bottom fragging in World War I. Dude, most people bottom fragged in World War I. Half the time, you just get out of the trench and you're just a fucking cloud of mist and dust, okay? You just turn into pink mist, okay? You're just shredded. Like the overwhelming majority is just 0-1 Andes, okay? Whoever was sitting on the fucking machine gun on the other side of the Gatling gun, that guy racked it up, but he definitely died too. So everybody died. Okay? Literally everybody fucking died. It was again, 17 million, dude. That's a big number. They had like 10 people back then, bro. The world was like 10 million people. 17 million people died.
The Christmas truce conflicts with that to a degree. So in Germany in particular, the Christmas truce goes out of favour definitely in the 20s and 30s. Whereas in Britain, it continues to be the popular...
Like whenever I watch shit like that, I'm like, bro, why are you like Why did they not try to do like special ops and shit? They would just like walk into machine gun fire. They were like, yeah, we're going to use overwhelming force. Like, we're just going to keep throwing new 17-year-olds at the problem over and over again. And they would just get shredded down, dude. There was no TikTok for lineups, dumbass. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just like alt or something. You know what I mean? It's crazy. No gulag to come back into the game yet. Yeah. Yeah, they were using 19th century tactics to fight a modern war, literally. Like, not even a modern war by today's understanding, but like modern for, like, they were fighting like everybody had shields and spears, okay? That's how they were fighting. They were like, yeah, just force push, just force push. Meanwhile, motherfuckers on the other side have a Gatling gun, okay? Really should have figured out the patch notes after the first one. Like, me, I'm built different, okay? I see that Gatling gun, I'm like, nah, I'm not going up there, bro. No shot. No fucking shot, dog. That's not happening. We keep pushing, dog. It's not happening. They keep out-aiming us. They have a better angle. We need to stop. We need to stop pushing over and over again, dude. Okay, but hear me out. What if we just keep pushing? That's literally what they did. Oh, tunnel warfare. World War I had tunnel warfare, like some spec ops. The other part of the problem is that, like, they kind of kill you. You get team killed pretty hard if you don't do that as well. They should turn team kill off, okay? Rookie mistake. Literally one of the quickest things you got to do is turn off team kill. No shot, okay? Team kill, very much on. Not good. Okay? But if the enemy is spawn camping, like, you have to figure out a different set of maneuvers. I mean, it was pretty OP though. They would get machine gunned by planes. They'd be dropping fucking poison and bombs. And then also on top of that, they're like forcing you to fucking rush like head first into Gatling gun fire. It's not good. You wouldn't have survived in my regiment back in 1914 with that attitude, young Turkish man. Yeah.
Celebrated story as part of the First World War.
The letters and photographs that reached home in Britain confirmed that this remarkable event had indeed taken place, but it was one that was not to be repeated.
The Christmas truce was unique, and nothing like it happened again to that scale. And the reasons for this are varied. Immediately after the truce, the high command of both sides stepped in to make sure that fraternisation and ceasefires like this would not happen in the same way. But also, in the long term, the real reason that truces like this didn't happen is that the war changed.
Didn't Hitler find the trenches for Germany during World War I? Pretty sure he got hit with a chlorine gas attack too. Yeah, Hitler's mustache. I don't know if this is one of those like old ass memes or not, but Hitler's mustache literally is so that he could keep a mustache while wearing a gas mask, right? That's where that comes from. Like, the Hitler stash was literally for, that was the utility, I thought. The mustache thing is not real. So what was it then? That is apocryphal? Oh, damn it. I always wanted to believe it. No, he was a big fan of Charlie Chaplin. He cut his stash after gas was already leaking through.
In the way in which it was being fought. As the war progressed, there's a more centralized method.
Bro, these things are fucking insane. There's also another fucking brilliant sequence with the tanks. Also, Who the fuck looks at like a comedian guy and goes, that's the way I want to look. I want to look like a fucking funny ass dude, okay? So dripless. Such a tactical misstep, okay? Like, who the fuck's like that Charlie Chaplin guy, that fellow, he's hot. Gonna fucking look like that. That's crazy. That's a crazy take, dude. Big mistake for Hitler. I think he probably really says a lot. I'm sure he had other bad things too. I'm not really familiar with his work, but I assume the mustache thing was like really, what a dumb thing to do. You're like, oh man, this jokester, I'm going to look like him. That's how I'll get the ladies. Just looking goofy as fuck, bro, with that weird ass mustache. Hearing this makes me think you would have zero riz in the early 1900s. The more I learn about this Hitler guy, the less I care for him. Yeah.
Those in the front line would have been forced into constant aggression. You would have had artillery and trench mortar units constantly going. And also, of course, as the war progressed, it took a far nastier
The Chapman
turn
staff
to
with the fuckboy look back then, maybe.
Introduced an increasing number of civilian casualties. You also get incidents like the sinking of the Lusitania. The temptation, I suppose, to empathise with the enemy and the desire to fraternise with them changed dramatically from 1915 onwards.
Yeah.
It can be argued that the Christmas truce made little difference to the course of the First World War, but it would be remembered as a crucial moment in history. The truce has featured in films, television programmes, inspired songs, and even featured in adverts. It's become part of the symbolism used when discussing the first.
Fun fact, the Nazis modeled their genocidal ethnic cleansings on the policies enacted by Turkish nationalists in the early 20th century. That is a fun fact, but also, I don't know if that's true or not. Not that like the early Turkish nationalists in the early 20th century didn't do things like that. Of course they did, but I'm pretty sure the fun fact kind of does a little bit of revisionism on the part of the United States of America and the indigenous genocide and also segregation. Pretty sure that was like documented and what was much more impactful than anything else. But you know, of course, NA activities here. Nah, Belgians and Africa was a bigger part of it. I mean, there's plenty of examples, but the eugenicists in America certainly was the Bracero program, the eugenicists in America, the eugenicist movement in America, and the treatment of indigenous populations was certainly a big role.
First World War, as synonymous with that conflict as poppies, mud, and war poets. This unique event has become legendary, in part because the idea of peace at Christmas in such an unlikely place is an irresistible story. But its enduring legacy is also due to these incredible photographs and the interviews from those who were there, documenting an event that to so many still seems wholly unbelievable.
Anyway, no haha German here, and Hitler said on the record, the treatment of Native Americans was a little too brutal for his personal taste. Okay, now it's like chat is heating up with the which genocide motivated Hitler shit. They all did, okay? This is why I stay away from this politics stuff, and I'm only talking about Hitler's mustache.